Hi, this is Sean McVeigh with Sean's Outdoor Adventures, and in this video I'm going to show you how to butcher a deer on the ground in the woods. Now, I've only done this, other than this video, I've done this twice in the past. The first time I ever butchered a deer, I actually did it this way. The reason was because the rope we had brought to hoist the deer up with kept breaking. So first of all, it's advisable and better if you can hang the deer. So I advise you, if you're going deep in the forest several miles back and you're planning to do a pack out, make sure you bring the necessities you need to hoist the deer, and I'll show you how to do a butcher job when you can hoist a deer in a separate video. For this one, however, just showing you this in case you're ever in a dire situation where you need to do it right on the ground. Secondly, like I said, I only do this in extreme necessity. I prefer to hang it because it's easier to get all the meat off and keep it clean. I'm going to be showing you how to remove the main muscle groups in this video. You can take your time and be more tedious than what I'm going to show you. I was a little bit limited. I filmed it with a little hat camera that only has about 30 minutes of record time, and it took me about 30 minutes to get all the major muscle groups off. But you can go back and get all the little itty-bitty pieces of meat if you want. You can be as thorough as you want. I encourage you to try to not waste any bit of the animal. And also, the technique I'm showing you, if you're careful when you're doing the skinning part, you can use the hide and tan it and things like that. The hide comes out really nicely. So let me go ahead and get started. I'm going to walk you through it. To start, I just want to recommend that everyone wear rubber gloves whenever you're gutting or butchering a deer for hygiene's sake. To start this process, we're going to start by cutting the hide around each leg underneath the knee joint. The reason why I say underneath of that joint is because you're cutting basically right on the bone, and it's just easiest for getting this whole process started. As you can see, I'm just going around each leg. It also helps if you're using a sharp knife. Next, I'm going to start on the back leg. I'm just going to run my knife straight up the leg. You're going to do this on each leg. While I'm at it, I'm going to fillet some of the hide off of this back leg, but I'm not going to do it completely. I just want to get it started while I'm here. Now I'm going to come up and do essentially the same thing on the front leg. I'm just going to start on the bottom leg. Then I'm going to come up to the top leg and do the same there. I'm going to run this cut and basically connect the two cuts that I've done across the front legs here. Now that I've done that, I'm going to run a cut straight up the center of the neck, all the way up to the head. I kind of hate these knives that are serrated at the bottom part of the blade. They give me trouble. In this kind of a situation, it's harder to get a nice, straight, clean cut. I'm only using it because that's what I had available, but normally I don't carry these knives. Once I reach the head, I'm going to cut around to the top of the head, as well as begin to fillet the neck hide down off of the flesh. And then I'm going to work the hide down off of that front leg and begin to work it back toward the center of the deer. As part of this, I'm going to make a cut right up the center of the brisket to cut that hide in half where it's currently connected. And that's going to enable me to go ahead and peel this whole side back, as you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and address this front shoulder. To begin, I'm feeling for the bone that goes right down the center of the shoulder blade. It's the T-bone basically. So it protrudes straight toward you. You feel for that, and then you cut straight down that bone, and then you're going to fillet the meat off of the shoulder blade. Another thing I'll just mention here, that this is an example of an extreme situation, so normally you would not have something like a tarp. But if there was ever a situation where you had to butcher a deer on the ground and you had a tarp available, definitely put that tarp down. It just helps keep everything clean. Once you get it done on the one side, you're going to go back and do it on the other side of that T-bone. Just be aware that on the bottom side especially, the meat wraps around to the back of the leg. So when you're filleting it off of that shoulder blade, you want to make sure you kind of go around and get as much of that meat as you can off the back side as well. Right here, as I'm cutting this part, I'm telling myself over my head, you know, don't let this slip out of your hand, don't let it hit the ground. And of course, when I get it close to being free, it slips out of my hand and hits the ground. This can happen. The meat is very slippery with the sinew on it, with just the outer layer. And what I like to do is I have a fresh trash bag ready that I've just opened up to put the clean meat in. And it's good to have a second bag available that you can put, in case you do drop anything and you need to clean it up better rather than potentially contaminate all your meat. Put it in a separate bag until you can get all the debris and any kind of dirt or anything that might carry bacteria, get that cut off. But I usually do that later, so I just try to put it in a separate bag if that happens. So in that sense, it's good to carry two bags, one for your pristine meat and one in case any of it does get some leaves or dirt on it. Now I'm going to go back up to that shoulder blade and harvest the meat off the top part of that shoulder blade there above that T-bone, I'm calling it. To do that, I'm just cutting down along that bone, and then I'm cutting the meat away from the rest of the shoulder blade, as you can see here. Now I'm getting a little bit of the meat still underneath that knee joint in that front leg there. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and remove the front shoulder. And these front shoulders come off just by cutting the muscle meat. They fillet right off of the body. It's kind of interesting. Now I want to remove the meat that's on the inside of this shoulder blade, but since I'm a little bit limited on my record time with this particular camera, I'm going to set this aside and keep working on the bulk of the meat so I can show that to you. I just put the side facing up away from the ground that I don't, obviously that I don't want to get dirty. Now I'm going to do some more work on the neck. So I'm just going to fillet the meat off of the neck bone the best that I can. But because of the design of the neck bone, it's very difficult to get all of the meat off. So doing it this way, you do lose some of the meat, which is not preferred. It is recommended that you stay away from, you can see the arrow exit hole here. There's a lot of blood right around that spot. It's recommended that you avoid any coagulated areas like that. Also, I want to peek up in the chest cavity. Normally what you do is reach up in there and fillet out the inner tenderloins. Some people call them the fish. I already did that before filming this, so I apologize for that. But you just want to look up in the chest cavity there. You'll see the two strips of meat on either side of the spine that you'll want to fillet off. That's one of the most choice cuts of meat on an entire animal. Now I'm ready to start working on this hindquarter here. What I like to do is start along the spine, along the top here, cut around that, kind of fillet right along the skeletal structure there, and then work my way into that hip socket joint. Once I get there, I'll cut right down along the bone in that back leg and sort of begin to fillet the meat right off of the bone. As you come along the top back side of this hindquarter, I usually feel for the bone. There's a bone right there. I cut down around that bone to get the flesh off of that bone there. On this leg, I'll show you how to take this whole chunk of meat off and keep it in one piece. And on the other hindquarter, I'll show you another and probably easier way to do it. And just because of the angle of the cuts here, I'm actually going to have to pass this meat underneath the leg bone itself in order to keep it all in one piece as I make the final cut to get it off. Next, I'll take the meat off from below that knee joint in the back. This is done essentially the same way as on any of the other legs. You're simply filleting the meat off of the bone. Now that that's finished, I'm going to come around to the top and expose the rest of the tenderloin, the backstrap, on this side. Once the hide is peeled back far enough, I simply follow along the spine, along the top there, and I make a cut down to help free up that backstrap. Once I make that initial cut down along the spine, I just follow behind it, lifting the meat up and gently cutting it away from the bone. That's a delicious piece of meat right there. I'm just pulling the hide back down to cover this side. It just helps to keep any dirt and leaves off of meat that's still exposed that I haven't harvested yet. But I'm just going to keep following through and getting the bulky stuff off for right now. And I just worked this whole side of the deer the same way I did the other side. As I mentioned before, I was going to do one thing a little different on this back leg. I'm simply going to cut this section of meat off rather than take the entire back hip off in one piece. So essentially I'm going to have two separate large pieces of meat. And in the butchering process, most people prefer to separate these different muscle groups anyway. When you do finally finish cutting off all the meat, make sure you take your knife and put your rubber gloves in your bag and anything plastic, things like that. Don't leave any waste behind. I hope you found that video helpful. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. If you like what I'm doing, please support what I'm doing. Maybe buy one of my books or a DVD I've produced. Go to my website, Sean'sOutdoorAdventures.com for that. Until next time, take care. God bless.